Alright, let's draw this T-rex that you saw in the thumbnail. Okay, first I start off with some of the major shapes. I try to hash in where the head is, where its mouth is, and where its neck and body kind of lives, and its tail. So once I kind of get a stick figure maquette of a drawing up, I then will work into the details. So first I'm blocking in all the major shapes that I'm seeing. I'm looking at an image of a T-rex kind of walking towards you roaring. Think of this blocking in session as like creating your blocks that you're going to chisel away and get finer details in. At this stage, when there's very few lines, it's easier to move things around rather than moving detailed objects. So I try to get everything in place and then start placing details. And I slowly add in the details. I want to add in details when I know that the object's going to be there permanently, like the face. Once I like the location of something, then I'll start getting more detail in it. At this stage in my drawing process, I'm just using a 2B pencil. This is just straight up computer paper. I like doing my drawings on computer paper just because it's cheap and an easy material. You can buy like 750 sheets or whatever for like 10 bucks. So you can get a lot of miles on the paper, and that's all that really matters when it comes to practicing, is drawing every day and trying to draw as much as possible. So now you can see the head is kind of coming along. I'm just darkening up lines as I have more faith in them. When I know that they're a good spot, I'll make them darker, because a darker line is a lot harder to erase. So since this dinosaur is kind of coming into the foreground, I'm working towards myself and then working further away. So the head is the closest detail, and now I'm working further and further away, trying to place things in front of each other as perspective would be. So here I'm drawing the foot. This foot is actually stepping forward. The other foot is actually being lifted up and coming towards you, but it's still in the background. Once I get far enough with the drawing, I will then start adding shade when necessary. So I'll start darkening in some of the parts. So some of these things, you don't need to put a whole lot of detail in. So if you know it's going to be in shadow, why put a bunch of detail into it? Just start shading it in. Detail is nice sometimes for texture when you're up close, but if you're just looking at the drawing from far away, really all that people see is, if you were to squint your eyes, that fuzzy kind of gray-white, they see the contrast of the colors and the grayscale. So just making sure that those pop is basically what I'm trying to do at this stage. And once I get my pencil drawing done, this is when I ink it. So now I know where everything is supposed to be, so it's just easy. It's just basically tracing what I already drew. I like to use a chisel micron pen, the number 3 size, but that's up to you. I find it's nice to get a thick and thin line. It's more of a calligraphy kind of like pen, but hey, it's able to get me like fine lines and able to shade in dark areas faster. And I like to draw really fast. So this is a sped up version of this drawing. This drawing really took me like 45 minutes to do. So it's pretty impressive, but this is still sped up. And whenever I can take the help of shading, I will. So like blocking in the blacks with a thicker pen rather than cross-hatching forever. Anytime you can save a minute or two, it's great in my book. So here I am just throwing in a bunch of texture lines and some shading lines. Eventually I'll come in and actually put Copic marker over the top of this. I always start with the gray colors. So once I get all the black in, I'll even come in with the dark black marker and go over the black parts even more. But it's just good to get a good sense of crosshatch in there. Just gives texture, and when you put the markers over it, it kind of blends in overall. So like the more layers you put in, those first layers of pen kind of fade away a little bit. So sometimes you have to come back in at the very end and give final touches on it. Now, if you're drawing along at home, it doesn't matter what kind of alcohol markers you use, or really what kind of markers you choose to do, doesn't matter. You could even do color pencil. But when you know and you work in layers, you always want to start with a drawing, then get more permanent as you go forward. In this case, pen and ink is probably the most permanent step I have, but when you go over it, it can be equaled out with layers of either chalk or color pencil or marker, because it'll kind of blend it and bleed it in. But feel free to always switch the steps. I like to use grayscale after I pen and ink, but sometimes I'll do grayscale before I pen and ink. Doesn't matter. And sometimes I'll even color it in before I pen and ink. But I find the more I fill in black, the easier it is for the coloring part. I'm not wasting my time in ink coloring in spots that might not need, much detail. And since the drawing part of this dinosaur is pretty much over, and the coloring is kind of subjective, you can color it whatever way you want. Like I say, I start with grays, and then I work with the lightest colors, and slowly work into the darkest colors, and kind of work tan belly, dark colored greens and blues on top. But you can do whatever you want. But yeah, I'll just leave you to watch the rest of this video, and if you pick up a thing or two, consider liking and subscribing. It helps. And thanks for watching.